Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now.
People ask me all the time about these monitors sitting in front of me. Not the monitor here on the MacBook Pro, but the monitors behind me, these Dell 30-inch displays. You can come into the chat room, type in "what is monitor." It'll pop up and tell you exactly what the monitor is. Each screen runs at a resolution of 2560 by 1600. Beautiful. My MacBook Pro 17-inch is a resolution of 1920 by 1600 pixels. I'm sorry, not 1600 pixels. I think it's actually by 1200 pixels. 1600 would be a little too much, but I know it's 1920, 1200, good to go. Anyway, it's a lot of screen real estate. So I thought what we'd do is kind of a roundup on things to think about when you go out to purchase a monitor. And there may be some obvious choices and maybe not some obvious choices. One of the things off the top of my head I wish I would have thought about in the past but didn't is something that sounds a little superficial, but it does make a lot of sense. The color of the bezel. That is I guess the plastic front part of the screen. And this is important, like if most of what I have throughout my office is silver, well then I'd certainly want to find something with a silver bezel. And most importantly, if I already have a monitor and I'm going out to get a second monitor, which is a scenario for a lot of people, downstairs, Ponzi's got two, the same brand, Samsung monitors, but two different colored bezels, and it drives her up the wall. It's just an aesthetic thing, but it's still something that's important to kind of keep in mind. Look around your office. If what you have is largely black stuff, then finding something with a black or a darker bezel is probably going to fit in better inside that current environment. Another thing that's also important, and I lucked out when I got Ponzi one of her second monitors, or I guess her second monitor, the type of connections that are available on your computer and the type of connection that is available on that particular monitor. So, for instance, the monitor that I got for her, a second monitor, was a relatively affordable one. It was an LCD, but it was a VGA LCD. And when I unpacked it, I'm like, uh-oh, I hope Ponzi has a VGA connection on the back of her computer. And I looked, and I'm like, thank goodness. So I should have done my research before I purchased the monitor. I just so happened to luck out. So make sure the connections that you have on the back of your machine, number one, are available, and number two, are available on the monitor that you intend on purchasing. Number three, and this is kind of, well, maybe I'm the only one who has this issue, but keep in mind about the size of the monitor, the desktop footprint. Now, this was much more important when we were purchasing CRTs. I don't know if anybody purchases CRTs these days. It's like, HDTV. Does anybody purchase classic tube televisions? Is it really still the tube? So think about how much space it's actually going to take up on your desk. And I tell you, I knew I could accommodate one 30-inch monitor. The second one was a bit more of a challenge, let me tell you. And because I knew I wanted to sit straight forward on one, I knew I'd have to throw the other one to the side and angle it off. But I almost ran out of space and had to reconfigure quite a few things. Again, I don't know if you're necessarily going to run into that issue, but it's still something to keep in mind. How much space is it going to take up? Is it going to take up less space than your current monitor? Or how much space would you want it to take up? Something to keep in mind. Now, Jason, you, I think, look for different things in a monitor.
Yeah, I look for a couple of different things. I look for the response time mainly in LCD monitors, mostly for gaming, because the higher the response time, the more tearing you're going to see in the games, and unfortunately, that's an actually ugly thing to see in a monitor. So if you can find a monitor with response time of about 2 milliseconds, that's pretty much the sweet spot that you're going to find on LCDs.
And when you're talking about tearing, it also happens not just with games, but movies as well. You'll have like jaggies that kind of go across the screen. The image is moving faster than the monitor can respond.
Yep, you'll see one half of the screen will update and the other half will still be on the old image, and you'll see this absolutely horrible jagged line in the middle of the screen, and it's an ugly thing, especially when you pay a pretty penny for a high-resolution monitor.
Or video card. Now, what about VSync? Doesn't that mitigate some of the tearing?
Sometimes it does, but unless the game is really very well tightly coded, you're still going to run into tearing unless you have a response time, as K-Tech points in the channel, 8 milliseconds or below, and 2 milliseconds if you're really really, really anal about it.
Yeah, the same thing kind of happens with, even on the desktop. I have some amount of tearing. XP seems to tear more than Vista because I think they've done things differently with 2D acceleration on the desktop with the Windows Desktop Manager inside of Vista compared to XP. But even it's not just a gaming or movie issue; it's just a general issue altogether. Now, Kat, you look for something specifically in monitors.
Yes, I do. It might sound silly to some people, but I know it's quite important to a lot of us. My eyes are extremely bad, even with glasses. So when I'm looking for a monitor, I have to find one that's physically large enough, and also, like you mentioned, the contrast. I have to be able to see it comfortably because I do spend a lot of hours a day on one. So that's my main thing I look for. I don't game, so I don't have to look for response times.
Now, what about you, Wireless Packet? Do you look for anything different in a monitor? Do you have any other suggestions when people go to buy a monitor?
It's just my own personal preference. I kind of like the widescreen a little bit better than the standard 4x3 in a monitor, and I also like the sort of glossy coating on the newer monitors.
Yeah.
I think it gives the image a nice look.
Well, we had that argument it was a couple months ago. We had the matte versus glossy argument in video. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
See, I never, for me, I never really liked the widescreen. I'm much more used to dealing with things in a vertical fashion. I never, even though I had the opportunity to pivot my monitors, which might be something that it would interest you if you would rather, orient your monitor in a vertical position. There are some monitors that can do that and some that can't. That might be something important for you to check on. But the widescreen always drove me nuts. Because, and I had this issue with one of my monitors, it was great. It had great horizontal resolution, pixels, but the vertical I just couldn't stand. It wasn't. I went from a 1200 vertical to like a 1040 or 1080 vertical, and it drove me up the wall because I was like, I don't want to go this way. I want to go this way.
Yeah, I agree. My dad just got a brand new monitor, and I don't even know what brand it is, but it's a really widescreen. And when I was down there visiting the last time and I used it, I was like, oh my god. It drove me nuts too, just like you said. I didn't like it.
Well, I've got 1200 pixels tall on the MacBook Pro, and that's one of the reasons why I find it a much more enjoyable experience. If I don't have 1200 pixels vertical, I go nuts. It drives me up the wall. I never use real estate on the left or the right side of the screen, other than possibly like my instant messenger or any kind of program that I don't necessarily want to pay attention to. But if I am paying attention, like with Outlook, I need it to go vertical. I always want it vertical. I never want it to go horizontal. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way my eyes were trained. Even with web pages. Web pages may be a little more horizontal, but I don't know. I don't see it the same way. And that's just me. Maybe it's just me.
Cold brought up a good point in chat just now. He said also check for how black the blacks are, because some LCDs still have a lot of glow behind the LCD itself.
That is true.
That's a very good point.
And pretty soon, LCDs will become a thing of the past. I think to replace them, they're talking, OLEDs? Organic?
Yeah.
Allegedly.
They were showing the other day, there was an article, someone in chat actually passed me a video of, it was basically like a little tiny membrane that they rolled up in their hand, and it was a video playing. And it's just amazing how they're taking this technology. Pretty soon our monitors are going to use a lot less energy, and they're going to be probably under a pound, maybe. Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
In weight.
If they're even a monitor at all. If it's not just the wall that is configured with nanites to automatically reconfigure themselves according to the signal that's being passed to them. Technology is definitely an exciting field to be in. Biff in the chat room says, what about multifunction? And yeah, this is a good thing to throw in. I had a monitor, an LCD monitor, that now Ponzi is using that has various inputs. Composite, component, DVI, VGA, S-video. It's got it's got a couple USB ports, and in fact these monitors here have USB ports as well as memory card readers, or like removable media readers. Those are features to look for if that interests you. I think having extra USB ports is always nice, definitely a benefit. Having the multiple video input sources, I wish I had on these monitors. That's the one thing I can say that I think is a nice add-on, because sometimes you may get some type of device that needs to plug in by composite or component or S-video, and having that sitting right here, it's very, very convenient. So that's another thing to think about, all those kind of inputs. Certainly, I think, worth the price. Wireless packet? Were you going to say something?
No, I was actually going to say, right now I'm looking at, I think it's a company called Planar, 26-inch widescreen LCDs. They just dropped their prices to $950.
Wow.
Per LCD monitor. So
well, you can pick up LCD
picking
monitors for cheap these days. I mean, that's almost an expensive one. I mean, but it depends what you get. You kind of, and with monitors, you do really get what you pay for. By and large, it's not always the case, and sometimes I would never purchase something without finding some kind of coupon online, but that's just me. You might as well save some money if you're going to spend it. And speaking of, if you want to register a domain name at GoDaddy.com, you can use the coupon code CHRIS, CHRIS, and save 10%. So you could register buyingmonitorstips.com, although I'm guessing that domain is probably already taken. Anyway, use the coupon code Chris at GoDaddy.com, 10%. And if you have any other suggestions for people out there, if they're looking to buy a monitor, if I'm sure we missed plenty of things that we need to think about, or you may need to think about, or maybe a friend or a family member needs to think about, and that's the reason why we do these videos, to help other people. So leave a suggestion, or you can email me, Chris at Pirillo.com. I read all my emails, may not respond to all of them, but I certainly do read them. And then, of course, you're also welcome to swing by the chat room anytime. We're typically talking tech. Wow, a little bit of a what would that be called? Alliteration there. Typically talking tech. It's not a bad byline. Ooh, another really awful bit of alliteration there. Anyway, Kat, tell them everything else they need to know.
You can visit us anytime, day or night, at live.pirillo.com. We'll see you later.